Welcome in to the Voice of College Football Nebraska edition. As always, I'm your host, Christian Hunt. What seems to be a rough day today was the Cornhuskers fall 49-14 to Oklahoma. This was Mickey Joseph's first game on the sidelines for our Huskers. And, Oklahoma really, really spoiled, what I kind of thought would have been a little bit closer anyways for us. That was a really tough game to watch. We're going to kind of let everybody start piling in and start kind of getting in here. And I want to hear y'all's thoughts on it. As always, I'm curious. This isn't my show; it's y'all's show, and it's our show, really. As to what we saw. My initial thoughts on the game. I'll probably have to go back and watch it. I mean, we got our asses handed to us today. Just being honest with you. From a defensive standpoint, they were able to really be balanced on their side of the ball. They were able to kind of, move the ball at will on us, and we just weren't able to tackle at certain points. I thought early in the game, we were able to we were able to blitz them, and we were able to get home at certain points early. And then as the game started going along after that Dylan Gabriel long touchdown run that kind of started it off for Oklahoma, I just felt like, the defense had to stop blitzing. They were scared to blitz, and Oklahoma just picked us apart. And on the offensive side of the ball, I felt as if, I felt like our offensive line kind of got a little bit exposed out there. Early in the game, in the first drive, we were able to, balance them a little bit. And we looked really good in that opening drive. We were able to run it. We were able to throw it out there. We were able to do some things that were pretty good and move the ball down the field. And after that first drive, I mean, man, it just seemed like penalties kind of came and hurt us at the wrong time as we were getting momentum on all our other drives. And then after those penalties, it was our offensive line that let us down. And I think part of that is, again, I think part of it is just, it's part of what Whipple wants to do. He wants to be able to push the ball vertically. And anytime, you want to push that ball vertically, you have to be able to protect it a little bit, right? He wants to, for lack of a better word, he wants to go out. He wants to throw to set up, the run. And, and today, today that just didn't really happen, right? I mean, they were able to get there, and they were able to sort of affect us, I feel like, throughout this game. And that really made a difference, I feel like, with Casey Thompson and our offense in today's game. Again, just some housekeeping things here. Again, this is the Nebraska Postgame at the Voice of College Football. Be sure to tune in to the Voice of College Football, our main channel, at 11:30 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. Also, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, as that really helps the channel and the algorithm. Again, I'm talking a little bit of shop here as Nebraska is down 49-14 to Oklahoma. Let's see here. Casey Thompson, he was 14-20, 129 yards. He had one touchdown. Excuse, my Southern grammar there. Not touchdowns, but one touchdown today. As far as the running backs are concerned, Gabe Irvin, we have a Gabe Irving side in everybody out there. He had 7 touches, 60 yards. A.J. Allen had 11 touches, 49 yards. Anthony Grant had 13 touches for 36 yards. Again, as quickly as we got down in this game, in the first half, we had to try to put the ball in the air. We had to try to throw it. And so that probably makes a little bit more sense here. Let's see here. The defense, they gave up 6 yards, per rush, and they allowed 580 yards of total offense to Oklahoma. Coming into this game, I remember last week they said, some of the comments you guys had said were, we're going to be lucky not to give up. We're going to be lucky not to give up 600 yards by the third quarter. So we did a better job there, right? So at least we didn't do that. Let's see here. We're going to try to jump into some of the comments here. See, still love Mickey. Yes, absolutely. Mickey Joseph, he did he did all he could coming into this. He had a week, and I think that's part of why they decided to make the move. instead of waiting until October 1st with Scott Frost. They wanted to give whoever the interim coach was, they wanted to give him a chance. They wanted to give him a chance to be able to come in. A lot of people weren't really thinking we were going to win this game to begin with. Even the most optimistic Nebraska fans out there probably, I can't really say that, we would think that, but you give Mickey Joseph a chance to come in, get his first game underneath him. Let's see what we can do, right? Learn from it. And then, you get 2 weeks before we jump into Big Ten play. I think, the thing here that I read an article and I set a reminder on my phone here. I'm going to kind of pull my phone out here because I want to make sure I read it to you guys too. I always love checking in on the Cornhuskers and everything like that. The one thing I liked, Mickey Joseph, it's not just one thing, but he did something and I really like what he did. Let me find this real quick if y'all will bear with me. Here it is. This was according to Husker 24/7 Sports. He said the music turned off at practices. Mickey Joseph wants his team to bring its own energy. The black shirts aren't around for the time being. Nothing negative there. Mickey Joseph wants his guys to start from scratch and earn them back. Yeah, I think that's it's positive. You know what I mean? They're cutting the music off, and that's a little thing, right? I liken it to like when you're working out, you're running, you're you're trying to sort of work out, and you get that second wind from music. Whenever you play football, you're out on the field, you're not going to get a chance to get hyped and use that music. And so I like that. I mean, I thought they came out a little bit more aggressive today. As far as taking the black shirts back, 100% agree with that. I think that's the right move. Nobody on that defense has earned a black shirt this year, period, point blank, end of story. They just haven't. I mean, it's pathetic. As far as, another thing I saw too was they started doing more tackling, at practice. Obviously I know the comment section here, and again, jump in the comment section. I'm going to start interacting with you guys a lot more on this show as it's just me today for you. One of the things I saw out there was, they said that you got a lot more physical in practice. The problem is you got to start doing that physicality. You got to start laying a lot of those roots and everything like that early in the year. And that's part of the problem. They just didn't lay that early on enough. I think we'll look a lot better as we jump into Big Ten play. Mickey Joseph is going to have a chance to, continue to lay sort of some of his fundamentals and some of the things he wants to do. But yeah, that's just my initial thoughts on this. Let's see here. It's not the coaches. Let's see here. Yourself says it's not the coaches. It's the players for not executing when they're supposed to blame is on them. They're young men, not kids. No excuse. Yeah. I mean, that is certainly one way to look at it for sure. Sometimes it comes down to execution, which again, that's like to me, it's like the chicken and the egg, right? Do you blame the kids for not executing, or do you blame the coaches for not putting the kids in the right position to execute and getting them trained up? So, in practice, they've seen this, they know how this is going to kind of go over and over and over again, right? Let's see here. Sports Life and Politics TV says this has to be the worst defense in Nebraska history. Yeah, I mean, this is not, again, it really goes back to, I think, the scheme that they're running, but also it goes back to the tackling, right? One thing that I've seen is they are just insistent on running these sort of two like nose tackle, defensive linemen. And you can see it today at today's game. If you go back and watch it, I kind of had a chance to kind of watch it a little bit more in today's game. When they started bringing in, Ty Robinson, Stephon Wynn, Devin Drew, those guys, Colton Feist, and you put those three big defensive linemen, with their hands in the dirt, you put them, on the field all at one time. And then maybe, you start rotating Mathis and Nelson and Caleb Tanner in there and starting to kind of do that. They looked a lot better. They were able to stop the run a little bit. The problem, and this has kind of been my thing with it, they need to look at maybe doing that and switching their defensive scheme up a little bit more. But the problem with that is when you play a team like Oklahoma and they actually start trying to push the ball vertically on you, it just, they start to nickel and dime you to death. And that's kind of what we saw today. A lot of the physicality that we demand, for our Cornhuskers has got to be laid early in the season. I have my own podcast. It is, Flat Rock Sports. I haven't been able to keep up with it as much as I've wanted to. One of the things I talked very, very early on before this year ever got started was this goes back to the spring game when we weren't tackling. We were two-hand touching. It was sort of a, we're going to try to sort of be more ahead of the curve. And when you have a very young defense like we do, this is the problem you run into. You have to get those guys out there. You have to get them reps. You have to get them tackling. There is no substitute for how physical this game can be. There's no, and you guys know that, right? Let's see. We're going to jump in here. They say hopefully with a bye week, Mickey can somewhat improve the defense. That's what I'm sort of putting my hat on. That's really what I'm putting my hat on. I think he's going to have a couple of weeks to really dig into this and sort of get the team, figured out. Really, I mean, he's going to have a couple of weeks to sort of put his fingerprint on this and do what he wants to do. It's kind of like a mini spring training, if you will, because now he's got 2 weeks to pretty much game plan out there. Let's see who is our next opponent here. Indiana. They've got 2 weeks to get ready for Indiana and the Hoosiers. Let me see here while I'm still talking with you guys, if I can kind of look ahead a little bit. Let's see. I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to really check it out a lot here. Indiana. Oh, wow. I might be a little behind here, but it looks like Indiana's actually losing right now to Western Kentucky. So that at least is something there. Wow. Yeah, Indiana's losing to Western Kentucky. There was another game I wanted to check too. I was kind of the Northwestern game. The reason why I was talking about the Northwestern game was I like to kind of keep a little bit of, a track on how our opponents did that we played, and in reality, the situation is from all intents and purposes. I mean, Northwestern, that was a close game for us and they beat us, but, I want to see how bad Northwestern really is this year, because I know that was another thing. They didn't look all that great either. So give me just a second here, if you don't mind. I'm going to jump back into it with you. Let's see here. Oh my gosh, Northwestern! I knew it was a close game. Northwestern lost to Southern Illinois, so that's about as bad as if we would have lost to North Dakota. So yeah, man, that's tough. Andrew Himmer says time to recruit better players. Yeah, look, I think this is what you can really make the argument for the Scott Frost era. I think when he was at UCF, he had to do a good job at recruiting for the scheme and recruiting for what they wanted to do. When he got here to Nebraska, I think they kind of opened up the budget a little more. They had obviously a lot better budget. He was able to get a lot better recruits, and he just, I don't know if it's that he didn't know how to recruit. I think really what it more or less was he just swung for the best athletes out there, not necessarily the best athletes that are going to fit what we do, right? And if you're not a good manager of young men and you can't put these guys in the right places to be successful and recruit for the sort of scheme you want to run, you can be the most talented team out there. You're just going to get, you're just going to get out coached. And that's kind of what I feel like has kind of been happening here. Let's see here. This is another interesting point. This is something I've kind of been stamping my feet down at, very early on, right? And Gary Snyder said it best. This season is lost. Play the younger guys in the trenches. The key there is playing younger players. It's tough because you got a guy in Mickey Joseph who really cares about this program. You can tell he cares about it, man. He wants them to be successful. It's his alma mater. I would say he's probably more of an old school guy in a lot of his beliefs than Scott Frost was. Scott Frost was more of that sort of new, younger generation. And they're not that far apart as far as age. I think it's just their philosophy and their belief system. But yeah, I think it's going to be crucial that, you play the younger guys, you get them reps, you get them in here, in these games. And, we saw that. We saw Chubba Purdy come in today and mop up duty. He threw an interception, should have thrown probably another interception. It got dropped. And, the other side of it was, He had a sort of a garbage time touchdown, but still, it's still good to get these guys in here and get them experience. Again, one of the things we talked about at the top of the broadcast was Gabe Ervin. I mean, he came in and he's the third string running back. And he still had, 60 yards. He still looked pretty good at times. Anthony Grant, he wasn't really able to get a lot going today, but I think that's simply because they kind of had to abandon the run game early on because we got down so big. Let's see here. This is a complete rebuild. Scott Frost never played or coached previously in the Big Ten. Designer offenses and defense just don't work in this league. Yeah, this is a physical league. This is a really, really, really physical league. These front sevens are just, they're totally different. I agree with you. They kind of go out and they kind of run, football is such a copycat league. And sometimes, people are trying to run or do or copy things that work and they just can't really do it all that well, right? Not necessarily what would be the best for us. I think personally, in my opinion, the best thing for us is it's not going to be the sexy offense or defense. It's going to be putting three like big grown men out there, like defensive linemen that are nose guards or defensive tackles on the field and letting them feast, not putting the pass rusher that can get back there and necessarily affect the quarterback, right? Because again, if teams can sit there and hand the ball off and get 6 yards a carry or 8 yards a carry on you, doesn't matter if you can get to the quarterback, if they can sit there and run the ball and then force you to get out of your assignment and then start play actioning you and move the ball down the field. It doesn't matter. And that's exactly like you're talking about, this designer offense and defense, right? It's frustrating because we don't have to be sexy to win. Again, on offense, we can sit back and we've got 3 or 4 really, really talented running backs. I would almost argue, and I don't know what you guys think, let's hear it. I would almost argue we have to do a better job we just have to do a better job at running the football. We can run the ball a hell of a lot better than we can pass block. And I think that's something we've been able to prove now and establish, even over the first, 4 games at this point. Let's see here. Let's see. This is a good one right here. Lynn Cooper says, do we keep Chin? Can he be a Mickey guy or just Frist? Our D is terrible. Or sorry, I'm assuming that means Frost there. Honestly, this is going to be a little bit interesting here, and I'll get into it, probably in the next question here. But I would say based off this, I think, one of the things that I kind of heard going into this week was, Eric Chinander, they kind of pulled him away from being more like over the entire defense, and they told him just to go focus on the secondary. So this week in practice, he wasn't covering the defense. He was more like position coaches were pretty much coaching their guys up, and it was more like that. I think Chinander probably won't be on this staff next year. He was a Scott Frost guy, and there's a lot of rumors and stuff like that right now that kind of don't really paint it all that great. I think Chinander was, a holdover from the Scott Frost era. I certainly don't think he's going to be, a Mickey Joseph staple, if you want my honest opinion on it. Let's see here. And we'll kind of get into this now. The focus for the next coach should be player development and identity. We have lacked that for almost 20 years. We did a couple of things really well from 1960 to 2003 and went away from that. Yeah. Look, I threw out some crazy names, a week ago for who I thought should be the coach. And I want to get away from that. I got a chance to really think about it this week. And, I think who we need to look at going forward, we need to kind of go opposite of what we did with Scott Frost. We don't need to go out. We don't need to hire an offensive guru, if you ask me. I think realistically what we need to do is we need to go out and possibly, if you want to go away from Mickey Joseph, right? And that's if you want to go away from Mickey Joseph, if he can't do enough, with the shot that he's kind of getting right here at his tryout, if you will. We need to look at maybe going with a defensive-minded coach, right? If you can bring in a defensive-minded coach, then there's a couple things that I think, would be pretty good. If you bring in a defensive-minded coach, you can let Mark Whipple come back for another year. You can probably keep Mickey Joseph, as your wide receivers coach, you're going to probably be able to, if you keep those two, there's a good chance that you're going to be able to keep Casey Thompson, Anthony Grant. You're going to be, you're going to be able to keep a lot of these guys, right? And that would be a good thing, because again, if you start cleaning house, and I see some guys that are saying, it's time to clean house. Uh, I don't know, because again, it's how, that may be better for the long term, but you want to sort of see a little bit of stability. Again, I think that the program has an opportunity with a little bit of tweaks in the off season and, just a little bit different mentality in this and actually installing the right schemes for what we need to do and recruiting the right guys that fit those schemes and understanding that. I think this team can do an absolutely fantastic job and turn it around pretty quickly. But again, you go out and you hire a guy like Mark Whipple. Today really wasn't the day you'd want for him to have. What I was kind of looking for was I was looking for Whip to come out, and I was honestly looking for them to come out and absolutely light it up. I thought, man, that would be an awesome, because then the narrative is, well, Mark Whipple was being held back almost by Scott Frost, but that didn't necessarily happen today. And I think part of that was just because we really haven't played anybody yet. I mean, between the three teams that we played, they just have not been good football teams, honestly. Arguably, Georgia Southern's probably the best team we played. And yeah, I think that's a big testament to why today was so lopsided. Honestly, is just it was a huge step up as far as who we were playing and everything like that. And that's a testament to Oklahoma. I mean, this game last year was a hell of a lot closer with Lincoln Riley as the head coach. And you look at a guy like Brent Venables, what he could arguably do at a program like Oklahoma as they look to transition into the SEC. They're more of a defensive-minded team now. And, they just happen to have a well-balanced offense that can be explosive at times. To me, that would be the benefit of going out and getting a defensive-minded coach into this program. Who that would be, I don't know. You know what I mean? I really don't know. I'd have to do a lot more research. Let's see here. Cy Guy 23 says time to clean house for the Huskers. Again, this is something that we kind of talked about. Again, comment down below, what you guys think here, whether the Huskers, actually need to clean house or not. This kind of brings me into another interesting, I think, point about this game here, as we transition here. What do you guys think the good and the bad for Mickey Joseph's first game was? I mean, honestly, again, I think my takeaway from it was, Mickey Joseph, I don't want to say a short week, but kind of a short week. You're going up against arguably one of the best teams you're going to play this year in Oklahoma. It's your first opportunity at your alma mater to really coach. I mean, it's a tough ask. it's a tough ask. You're inheriting a football team that in the trenches has just not been good this year. And again, that starts early in the year, almost around spring training, early in fall camp. It's setting that tonality in the trenches. And that's just a tough ask for Mickey Joseph. But again, I want to get your guys's comments down below on that. Speaking of the trenches here, the O-line gave up 4 sacks today. And it seemed like, again, it was just at critical moments in the game where, we were pushing the ball, we were moving it. There was a penalty or something like that would just deflate us. And then, okay, we're still, we're still got an opportunity on second long, third and long or whatever. And then we just couldn't hold them. Prohaska, he was out of this game, and, Prohaska was out of the game, and that kind of maybe affected. I don't think it affected the outcome of the game, if I'm being honest, but it was good at least that we got Travis Vokalek back in the game. We got Nick Heinrich back. So those are two positives, if you will. I'm not trying to be the positive Peter of this game, right? But getting them back was certainly, I thought was going to be a bigger boost for us than what it probably was. Let's see here. Let's see. The gambler himself says, will any of the Big Ten West teams ever really have a chance of beating Ohio State or Michigan in the title game? That's a good question right there. I mean, that really is. I think so. I think if anybody would, it would be Nebraska. Again, I don't really want to jump into it. I mean, I almost do, but I don't want to because I know the smoke's going to come for me down below. There's a lot of rumors right now, kind of circulating out there. And again, I don't like being a guy that buys into rumors and stuff like that. But if you kind of, you got to almost have to say, well, where there's smoke, there certainly could be fire. About some of the things that kind of happened while Scott Frost was here, and potentially some of the talent we let slip through our hands. And some of the things that were kind of going on there. Uh, you know, I certainly think that Nebraska, if anybody in the Big Ten West, has the best chance to compete for him. We just have to have the right guy, leading the program. That simply is all it is. You got to have the right guy, and he has to have. And here's the thing, right? He doesn't need 5-6 years to determine how good he's going to be. You're going to know whether we've got the right guy by year 3. If you're not winning more than 4 games, there starts to be a lot of murmurings about things kind of going on inside the program. And there's a lot of blame game kind of going on. There's a lot of blank stares, like in the post-game press conferences. Well, that's not the right guy. That's just not the right guy. It's the guy like, almost like Brent Venables. I saw something today where they were talking about it, the Oklahoma coach. But I saw something today where they were talking about old Scott. I don't want to kick him while he's down, but it's just, he kind of had the same look on his face game in, game out, whether we were doing stuff great or we weren't. And, somebody was saying, the only other coach that really is like that is like Bill Belichick, as far as like a lot of other coaches, they're real fiery, they're real rah. And that's the great part about being able to coach at this level is you can still do that. You can still be a rah kind of guy. You can coach with emotion, in the NFL, you can't really do that, right? In the NFL, it doesn't matter whether you lose one game or not. In college football, a lot of times, and it's not going to be like this down the road, as we expand the playoffs. But the great thing about college football is you can have that sort of, that emotion behind it. One game makes or breaks the season for right now, right? To answer your question, I think, as far as will somebody be able to ever really have a chance of beating Ohio State or Michigan? Yeah, I think, again, the reality of the situation, if anybody could do it, it would certainly be Nebraska. That is for sure. Nebraska almost beat Michigan last year. Granted, I mean, almost doesn't really mean a whole lot unless, we're playing Polish horseshoes, right? Or whatever have you. But, and Michigan beat Ohio State. It's always an interesting who can or shoulda, woulda, coulda game that we can play with this. I personally think within the next, if Nebraska gets the right coach in the next couple of years or so, I think they'll be right back up there. We'll certainly have a chance to be right back up there and push them again. The Big Ten West, I mean, from everything I'm seeing, again, let me click back into this. You got to think about this. Northwestern lost today to, I think it was Southern Illinois. I just had it up here and I clicked out of it, so you'll have to excuse me. While I'm looking this up, if you guys don't mind, kind of talking about, what your guys' observations were in the game, for today's game, maybe who you want to see, as the next head coach, whether it be Mickey Joseph or Urban Meyer, whoever you want to see, let me know down below. We'd love your feedback. Okay, it looks like, and I could be wrong on this, it looks like Indiana right now is tied, and this is our next opponent we're going to be playing. They're in overtime versus Western Kentucky. So, yeah, I mean, again, the Big Ten West, it's up for grabs, and there's a lot of uncertainty kind of going on out there in the Big Ten West, uh, for sure. Again, what I want to see, kind of transitioning out of that, I'll say is this. I want to see how does Mickey Joseph, though. I want to see how does he respond. He's got a couple of weeks to really dig in deep, really start hammering, the team and really see what they're made of. Mickey Joseph, as we transition into a bye week and as we start transitioning into Big Ten play, has a chance to establish himself, in this league. Maybe, okay, again, just maybe he can do something. Now, again, I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know how far gone, we really are into the season. just based off of some of the things we've seen, as far as it may just need it just we may just need a full off season or a couple of years to really fix a lot of these problems, right? That's for sure. Let's see. It's a good one right here. NCAA playoff. Again, welcome back, sir. It's always good to see you on here. Would Dino Babers, current head coach of Syracuse, be a good fit at Nebraska? I think, I've done a lot of coverage I did a little bit of coverage on Dino Babers up there at Syracuse. He's been good and bad. He's kind of had some good years, and he's fallen off, it seems like, over the last couple of years at Syracuse. If I'm not wrong, I think Dino Babers a couple years back ended up beating I think Dino Babers, if I'm not mistaken, ended up beating Clemson, if I'm not mistaken. NCAA playoff, if you don't mind, tell me in the chat real quick, while we're kind of looking through this, was he a defensive-minded coach? I can't remember. If he's a defensive-minded coach, I think he could be, right? Because, I mean, he does an okay job at being able to, sort of do something with that Syracuse program, right? I mean, it's been a long time since Syracuse has really been relevant in football. I mean, gosh, what's it been? Donovan McNabb back in the 90s was probably the last time they were actually relevant at football. And they were in a different league, if I wasn't mistaken, back then. Rob Johnson. Again, I wasn't campaigning to keep Mickey. I just wanted y'all's opinions here. Frost 4.5 favorite in his first game, lost by 4. Difference 8.5. Mickey plus 11 by 35. He was, not scheduled to win this game. Difference of 24. Yeah, keep Mickey sure right. Yeah, again, I wasn't campaigning for it, but also you got to make the argument here that, I mean, he's had 6 days. You know what I mean? This is Scott Frost's team. That again, that's kind of the reality of it, right? Let's see. Terry Linden says, just keep hitting the reset button. This is an example of what it looks like. Nebraska is way too far behind, in my opinion. Okay. Yeah. I think that's certainly one strategy that we're looking at here. You got to hit the reset button. A lot of people are saying, let's hit the reset button. Let's hit the reset button and see what can happen. I mean, at this point, we're kind of 4 games into the year. We're 1-3, and that's why you make that move on Scott Frost before the buyout, I think, right? Is you want to let everybody know, hey, we're open for business. Are you coming? And so, yeah, I think that's part of it here. Let's see here. B May 4747 says, I think Gary Patterson would be a great next head coach. He turned TCU around. The Longhorns defense played unreal against Alabama. No disrespect to Mickey Joseph, great man and well respected. Yeah, I like Mickey Joseph. I think he's a great guy. I learned something new about him today too. I didn't realize his brother was Vance Joseph, the one-time head coach for the Denver Broncos. He's got a lot of coaching ties in that Joseph family. Let's see here. Let's see. I think Gary Patterson would be pretty good. Yeah, Texas defense stepped up, and they played pretty well against Bama last week. I mean, they really did. Now Bama, their offensive line is suspect this year, man. They don't look that great because Texas was able to get to them at certain points. They were coming after, Bryce Young, in my opinion. NCAA playoff says Babers was mostly an offensive-minded coach in his history. Okay, hey, again, it could work. Again. It'll be interesting to see because, if you probably bring in a guy like Dino Babers, you're probably going to, if you bring in an offensive minded coach, I think the only thing is if you bring in, an offensive minded coach is you're probably going to get rid of Whipple, which I know right now, probably the number one comment is going to be, do we really want him? I mean, we just put up 14 points, right? 14 points against them. Yeah. That's the only thing. He could do it. You know what I mean? Again, I think the hard part of it is right now, we need a coach that's kind of proven at this level, right? Again, it's not so much about, can you come in and can you sort of guide the program and be okay and get us up to, 6-7 wins. It's, can you not only get us back to winning and having winning seasons and getting us back to bowl games, but can we start making that, just like somebody else said in the comment section, very early, very early. Can we sort of make that turn and get back to winning national championships again, right? And can we start competing for the Big Ten West? I'm going to take this headphone off. I can't hear anything. I can barely hear myself talk. Let's see here. This is another good one. Gary Snyder says Jim Leonhard. I believe Jim Leonhard, if I'm not mistaken, I think he was the Oklahoma State defensive coordinator. Now he's over at Ohio State. Yeah, I think he is, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong with that, but he's either the Ohio State defensive coordinator, right, or is he the Wisconsin one? I could be wrong on that, but yeah, that would be a good fit. Let's see here. I'm gonna keep jumping in here. James, let's see here. We're going to jump over here. James Fernhaber. Got to have a coaching staff who can recruit. Line play is always key. Also need better speed, especially at linebacker. Agreed. That system that they're running, your middle backers have got to be able to fly to the ball. And, Heinrich and Reimer, they do okay. But, I mean, the reality of the situation is in the run game especially, the way they run that scheme, they're not eating up blocks down there. The interior offensive line is getting up to them, and they're just pushing them off the ball. And that's part of that is scheme. Part of that's how they want to play their guys there. Let's see here. Dan Michael says, what if it's not the coach, but something on a bigger level? What then? Keep firing, and I'm assuming he said psychoanalyzing here. Yeah, look, you're saying it's not the coach. Again, how do we seem to get worse and worse this year, right? For me, from what I've been told, and again, I don't want to jump all the way into this, just research some of the stuff and some of the allegations kind of starting to come to the surface here with old Scott Frost. I'm not saying they're true or they're false, but do your research into it. You know what I mean? This is essentially a program like Nebraska, as great of a fan base as we have, as storied of a tradition as we have, I mean, honestly, we just paid a guy $7.5 million because he was bad at his job and it was 1-2 going into this year and won 3 games 2 years in a row before that. We paid him $7.5 million to not be on our sideline for basically a week. Who in North America wouldn't want to take that job? Because if I'm decent at my job, okay, worst case, I'm not great. I'm going to come over there and I'm going to get a payday, right? And it's not about payday. I think it's about those little things. Today was about several little things that compounded and just weren't being addressed and weren't being taken care of. I really think, Dan, that's my take on it, right? Rob Johnson, I love it. Get behind the volleyball and synchronized swimming. Listen, man, I can't swim. I mean, I can swim. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a good synchronized swimmer, man. I'm like a porpoise, man. You throw me out there, I'm gonna sink right to the bottom, right? I'm a rock. Get behind, but the volleyball team's pretty good. I think were we still number 2? I can't remember. I know we were there for a minute. Here we go. Here, I think bigger than a head coach is how does Nebraska handle their toxic football obsession? How are we going to hold a head coach when there's a clear pattern of firing everyone? Well, again. Again, you got to go back to the last 3 coaches, right? The last 3 coaches, which was Bo Pelini, he got fired because he was a little too toxic, which is why at certain points I really don't get the Urban Meyer comparison there. Have we really grown, you know what I mean, as a fan base to where we think that bringing in Urban Meyer and how sort of mean or toxic he can be, you know what I mean, is any different than us letting go of Bo Pelini because, he was a little too aggressive and there was other things like that, right? There's that. The next thing is, the Mike Riley era. Mike Riley had 1 good year where he went 9-4, if I'm not mistaken. And then he had 2 really bad years. And then the Scott Frost era where he took over and he pretty much had 5 years. Yeah. I think that's part of the big problems there. You know what I mean? It's, I don't know if it's necessarily like you're going to know what you're going to get by year 3 of having a head coach. You know what I mean? And it's really it's a coin flip whenever you hire somebody that's been in a program and is an alumni. You know what I mean? Because you feel an unnecessary, almost an unnecessary amount of pressure to have them succeed. You see that year in and year out. Jim Harbaugh at Michigan, Kirby Smart at Georgia. Oh gosh, I'm trying to think. Mario Cristobal over there at Miami. I don't know why I was struggling with that. I wanted to say Oregon in my head, but Miami. They feel a lot of loyalty to them, right? And that becomes tough because if they don't produce, they don't do well, then sometimes we're sort of scrambling for answers, right? The other hard part of it too is again, not to make a big deal about it or anything like that, because again, we don't know. But I guarantee you, there's going to over the years, there's going to be a lot of stuff that starts floating to the surface, and you're going to start seeing, people coming forward and talking about, probably just how badly run this team really was in these years. Again, some of those allegations, some of those allegations out there was, he was showing up late to practice. He was showing up a little intoxicated, right? And stuff like that, man. And I don't know if that's true or not. Like I said, I don't know if that's true. But again, if it is, and there's a little bit of that doubt, there's a little bit of that, right? That is, man, if that's true, and there's assistant coaches, pretty much going up. And this probably there was a lot of assistant coaches in the program that were going up to the athletic director, which would have been Trev Alberts, talking about, a lot of this stuff and complaining, and like nothing got done. And so, that to me, it's one of those things where there's that. And then you look at the whole Dylan Raiola situation. That's why Donovan Raiola is our offensive line coach right now, was because it was a last ditch Hail Mary effort to sort of get him into the program. So maybe we could have a shot at, a high level quarterback like Dylan Raiola. So, because they fumbled the ball and they fumbled the bag with him. He was pretty much a sure thing to come in. And they said Scott Frost didn't show up at, when he was supposed to show up. He had a little bit too much fun, that day, and wanted to do it over Zoom, and they wanted it, and they had the whole family there ready to go. Again, I don't know if that's true or not. That's just, I don't know if that's true or not, right? It's just, you hear things like that, and then it makes you almost wonder, how could it not be, right? It almost makes you wonder, if we had somewhat of a competent coach going into this, would we be in this situation, right? We had a guy that could recruit really well, and again, I see it in the comment section. We need to recruit really, really well on the lines of scrimmage, and we really do. We need to recruit really well, and we need to probably switch up some systems and start getting back to what works for us. Honestly, we don't need to throw the ball with it. We don't really need to throw the ball that much. We really probably need to pound the ball down everybody's throats, try to play the time of possession game. And that's what we need to do. Instead of going out and trying to have these pass rushers on the edge to try to get after the quarterback, we also really don't need to maybe look at doing that either. We need to look at, again, maybe shifting that around and getting 3 defensive tackles on the line, whether that be, again, my 3 would be Colton Feist, Stephon Wynn. Devin Drew made a sighting today, so that's good for him. The Devin Drew thing, from what I've been told, was really tough because going into this year, he transferred from Texas Tech, and there was an eligibility thing where he had to graduate from them. He didn't graduate until, I think it was he didn't join the team. I think it was until about 2 weeks before the Northwestern game. So that's really tough, for him to sort of be expected to really contribute and jump in and play on a 2-week notice. Again, it's just one of those things where, it's just, I think a lot of it's changing the schemes, getting the guys in the right position, getting a new head coach that can run it and lay the foundation for being physical. Really, to me, it's about the coordinators more so than anything else. Again, probably getting rid of Chenander would probably be one recommendation I would have, and looking somewhere else with that. The second thing would be, trying to figure out a way to keep, figure out a way to keep Mickey Joseph as a wide receivers coach, because what he can do as a recruiter and what he can do as a wide receivers coach, I think he can really develop this really young wide receiving core that we have. And I think he's going to be an asset. Mark Whipple, if you can get him and Casey Thompson back for another year, Again, that's going to be a huge plus. You go back and you look at what Whipple did when he was at Pittsburgh. That's another great example, right? What Whipple did at Pittsburgh was it took, his first year at Pittsburgh, they were ranked 112th in total offense in the country. Um, and next year, I think they got up to like 60th. And then last year was the year with Kenny Pickett where they skyrocketed up to a top 5 offense in the country. Um, so you got to give Whipple a chance, I think, to really put his mark on this on the offense. And that's why I go back and I say if you hire a defensive minded coach, you have a really good shot at keeping Whipple. So let's see here. Da-da-da-da. Yourself says when the players don't execute properly, how do you get them to execute properly? That's a really good question. That's a really good question. My recommendation, if they're not executing properly, is again, it goes back. We talked about this a little bit earlier on in the broadcast. I feel like um, it goes back to how do you lay that foundation? You know what I mean? Do you say it's the player's fault, or do you blame the coach for not putting them and not having not putting them in the right position to be successful, or not, not coaching them to be ready for that game, right? And that's the key that you have to understand with it. Is it the players not executing, or is it the coaches not coaching and putting them in the right position? Now, again, we've talked about this, with where we're at. I mean, this is going to take a while for us to get this fixed, right? It's just going to take a while. I mean, we're going to have to start really kind of going back to the basics and just focusing on that. I mean, that's the tough part about all this here. Let's see. CAA playoff brings up a good point. He says many college football teams have a football obsession. Look at Michigan, where Harbaugh barely made it through last year, winning 8+ games every year. Let's see, beating OSU saved his job. Yeah, I agree. I think that kind of changed the narrative a little bit. That certainly changed the narrative around Jim Harbaugh. A lot of Michigan fans were starting to get kind of pissed off that they weren't beating Ohio State. They weren't doing these things. And if you think that we bring another coach in here and we don't start competing with Michigan and Ohio State, even if we win 6, 7, 8 games a year, even if we start making it to the Big Ten, uh, championship game, uh, our fans are going to start getting pissed too, right? And that's how we get back in these situations a little bit, right? Again, I think a lot of the arguments is when you get a good coach and they can win 8, 9 games a year, are you okay with that, right? Are you okay with them winning 8 or 9 games a year? Here's the thing. Again, college football is changing. The landscape of college football is changing. We're getting ready to go to a 12-team college football playoff, right? You could certainly make the argument that even the second or maybe even third best, team in the Big Ten could make it there. If they can be a top 12 team, I mean, why not, right? So again, if that's something we can get better at, maybe we can get back and maybe have a chance to sort of get to the playoff in that way, right? Let's see here. Da-da-da-da. It's another interesting thing here too from NCAA playoff. Again, thank you so much for being a contributor. It seems like week in and week out, man. Honestly, I appreciate that. Osborne and his coaches met with Bobby Bowden and they talked about how to recruit speed and athletes. That's when things really turned around for Osborne. Yeah, I mean, those old Florida State teams, man, they were tough. And there's a lot of speed down there, right? And they started to realize that, hey, maybe, just maybe, we've got the power, we've got the offensive line, we've got the smarts, but how do we sort of speed's that one thing you can't teach. You're either born with speed or you're not. I unfortunately was not born with speed. I had to work my ass off to run a 4.740 when I was in high school. I was not a fast kid, so I can tell you right now. And I grew up down there in Georgia. It is not something that I was blessed with. But there's some people that you meet, and you guys know what I'm talking about, where they just go. I mean, they're just quick, and it's a tough thing. Let's see here. Mark Laporte, this is an interesting one. Is the Mountain West taking teams? Well, I tell you right now, we may want to get our applications in order, right? NCAA playoff. Thank you. You guys make this awesome. Again, this is one of the best fan bases in college football. It's not always easy. Especially like a week after this, where we got hammered, but again, it's going to get better. It's not right now. I get it. The sky's falling. We look like crap against Oklahoma. It's going to get better. You kind of have to go through this. And I always liken it to this, it may take a couple of years, but eventually, this is going to be, we're not going to necessarily maybe look back and laugh at this. I don't think that at all. But eventually down the road, I mean, a couple of years from now, we'll be playing in a big game that'll be very meaningful. It'll be a completely 180-degree turn. And I mean, realistically, it's going to be a situation where they're going to reference this point in time, in Nebraska football history. They're going to talk about, you're going to hear the announcers talking about it, right? They're going to be talking about how, they're going to be talking about how, we were 1-3, how we had these tumultuous years, the Frost era. They're going to put their own spin on it. And, it's going to be one of those things that we're going to be looking at for sure. And hopefully, like I said, we can sort of get to that new era of Nebraska football. It's an interesting thing here. Nebraska is really, really bad. I don't know if there's a fix, at least not within 5 years. Again, if you get the right coach in there, I think, again, by year 3, by year 4, I think that I think you can do it. It's really not that bad. I mean, we're in a new era now where, they have a top, from what I've been told, they've got one of the best, where you can pay players now, essentially. You can't, but you can. You can pay players now, and Nebraska is leading the way in that, right? Listen, I keep hearing this. Well, why would people want to come to Lincoln, Nebraska? If you pay me $1 million+, you know what I mean, and you're willing to pay more than what everybody else is willing to pay for me to travel halfway across the country, you're damn right I'm getting on a plane and I'm coming to Lincoln, Nebraska, right? I mean, another interesting aspect of it is, for everybody listening, I mean, let's be honest here. You think Tuscaloosa, Alabama is that exciting of a place to go? Athens, Georgia, you think that's really that much more special than, there? Auburn, Alabama. Well, Auburn's probably a bad example. You look at some of these, Columbus, Ohio. I mean, what does Columbus, Ohio really have that Lincoln, Nebraska doesn't? Again, I really don't know. I've never been to Columbus, so I really couldn't actually tell you that. Yeah, this is another good one here. It says Arkansas program was completely decimated after moving to the SEC. Took 25 years of 3 to 5 win seasons to get it back. Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true. And that's a good point there. Sam Pittman, took over, and gosh, he's been there for a little bit. I think he was there that same year that we hired Frost. He's getting them turned around, and that's the thing. If Arkansas fans, hell, they were just happy to have a guy that had a little bit of a Southern accent, come back and bring some of that swagger, back, like Sam Pittman. And I'll tell you right now, Sam Pittman came in and he changed the complete culture of that, from the Chad Morris years. I mean, it was just a completely different, different team. I feel like, year in and year out. I think that first year with Sam Pittman, they held Georgia pretty close. I mean, they ended up losing. They gave Georgia a little bit of a scare though. So that's how you knew that things are going to be a little bit different. I feel like down there in Arkansas. Yeah. So let's see here. We're going to probably do it for a little bit more. Guys, feel free to comment down here below and get your. I think we've got a little bit longer in this. I want to at least let us hit an hour and go. Jigs Casey, this is an interesting point he brings up here. If Frost was still coaching, they would have only lost by single digits. Yeah. Yeah, they would have lost by single digits, but that's the Scott Frost era, right? You go out and you lose to Georgia Southern. We almost should have lost to North Dakota. We lose to Northwestern, who's, they're a terrible team. And yet, yeah, you're right. You come back out and you barely lose to Oklahoma. A loss is still a loss, my friend, and that's the problem. That's the problem. It's part of it. We just talked about NCAA playoff says it again. Northwestern losing to Southern Illinois makes the Big Ten West look really bad. Yeah, I I agree. It's I definitely agree with you. Um, it's man, it's tough. It's tough. I mean, that's the hard part of it is the Big Ten West. I mean, is it's a winnable league. It's a league we should be competing in. Honestly, that's the hardest part about this, man. And is it's just it's so unpredictable. Because I liken it back to when we had to pull away late. A couple weeks back against North Dakota. They just couldn't pull away, and that's not good for them and for this league. Uh, Gavin Robinson here. We're going to throw it over to you. What do I think about October 1st against the Indiana Hoosiers? I think it's going to be a lot better showing than what we put together today. I think it's going to be, I personally, I think it's going to be a lot better, right? I think part of it's just because you're giving Mickey Joseph and this team a pretty much an opportunity you give Mickey Joseph a game to kind of get his self centered, right? You get him some experience there. I think that's part of why they did this was they felt like the reason why we got to move on from Scott Frost is simply because we want to get our interim coach in there. He needs to have, a game of experience. If we're going to do it, chances are we're probably not going to beat Oklahoma. So at least we can kind of control that narrative. It just happened in this game. We got blown out of the water. You getting the first time coach out there, 6 days worth of, he inherits he has 6 days to kind of get this team ready. And he kind of got tossed a live grenade, if you will, with some of the things we've been hearing and stuff like that. And it's kind of like, okay, don't let it explode. The pin's out. And that's kind of what we saw today. But, he is going to have a couple of weeks off, I think, to really be able to put his foundation pieces into this, man. I mean, that's the great part of it. He's got a couple of weeks to sort of okay, breathe a little bit. We got through this game. That's probably going to be the toughest game of the year for us. Hopefully, it was Oklahoma, and to start rebuilding this team, from other standpoints and laying some of those more foundational pieces. It's hard to teach physicality, and the only way you can really teach or coach physicality is you got to tackle, and it sucks, right? You got to tackle and you got to coach. And that may be how Frost kind of got some of these cats out here, that he got, was, show up, we don't really do a whole lot of tackling. You guys have played a lot of football. You understand those concepts, and they're still young men. You still got to go out and you still got to tackle, and they got to do that. Offensively, they need to run the ball. They need to stop trying to throw the ball down the field, and the offensive line is just not that great. They need to run to set up the throw, or they need to run to set up the pass and get back to that. That's the big thing I've got. Let's see here. NCAA playoff says, what's your opinion? What's my opinion about the Big Ten keeping or eliminating divisions? Well, I know the ACC started doing that, right? The ACC started doing that. And I think part of the reason why they did that, I like it. You know what I mean? If they were to go towards doing that, I think the reason why they would do that is, for example, like if Ohio State or, Penn State or whoever, like that, or Michigan or somebody like that were the two best teams, in the league, well, then you get to see them go for it, right? And I mean, what you could see happen with that is you could have sort of, again, you can have three really, really good teams, you know what I mean, sort of at the top, and somebody gets left out, and that kind of happens now. I like it. You know what I mean? I certainly would like it. I think that would make the Big Ten championship game a lot more. I think that would make it a lot better. Honestly, the other thing that I kind of like about it is, kind of like last year, when you saw Georgia and Alabama play, when Georgia and Alabama played in the SEC championship game, Georgia beat, or Alabama, beat Georgia. And then you saw the opposite of that in the Natty. I think that would be a more interesting dynamic, and you'd see probably a lot more stuff like that probably happening out there, right? Let's see here. Yeah. Gavin Robinson, but we start 1-3. We have to move on Scott Frost now. We on bye week. Yep, exactly. We're on to the bye week, and that's exactly what you want to do. He also said, we got to take care of the ball and other things like that. This is another good one. EOS San Diego says that game was horrible. The only thing that game proved is Trev Alberts wasted $7.5 million on firing Frost 10 days early. On the bright side, I actually saw Ty Robinson make a tackle. Yeah, I think, this was a business decision for, I'll kind of address it. Ty Robinson, I'll start off by saying this. Yeah, he finally showed up and he finally did something. Now, and I don't know if what his role really is in that defense. I don't know if it's just to eat up interior blockers or really what it is. And he doesn't really show up in the stat sheet, but you're right. He finally made a big, tackle for loss today. So that's good. The other side of it is, the reason why I think they paid him $7.5 million to go ahead and book. We've talked about this is you get the interim coach in there, you get him a game, then you get him a couple of bye weeks, right? I think the other reason why they wanted to do this was they wanted to open the position up early, and they wanted everybody to know, hey, we're we're open for business. If you're decent at coaching and you think you're up for the task, we want you to interview, right? Because we're we're hiring. That's part of the other reason why they wanted, in today's college football landscape, it's not so much about loyalty so much as it about how quickly can you come in and how quickly can you win games. That's ultimately what it's about. I don't agree with it, at certain times, but that's really what it comes down to. It's not about, who can be the most loyal, whether it's player or coach. It's just about who can come in and produce. And, they wanted that to be pretty well known. I think the other reason, and I saw a comment about this a while back, was, God forbid, Scott Frost kept it close or won this game and then still goes out and still somehow pisses away the rest of the season. You know what I mean? Does it become harder to fire him at that point? Because again, I think Trev Alberts kind of understood going into this that, hey, maybe we need to, changes needed to be made. Changes definitely needed to be made here. For sure. So that's my take on it. I think there was just more positives to get rid of him early. At first I kind of thought probably the way you did. Why in the hell did we let go of him 10 days before or whatever it was before we really needed to? And I think that's honestly why they did it. It was just they just wanted a clean break, and this is the only way they could do it. Let's see here. Spod One says Nebraska has top 25 recruits every year. They have the talent. Yeah, they certainly do. The first couple of years, and they've averaged, I think it was like the 24th best recruiting class in the nation since Scott Frost got there. The first couple of years, they were in the teens. And then after that, they started sinking back. And now I think they were like number 30 or number 4. They were like 32nd or 40th last year, something like that, if I'm not mistaken. And that actually brings up a good point here. Talent means nothing without emotion on the field. You got to be able to, and that's exactly right. Jim Filippi says that, and it's true. You got to be able to manage that talent. And that's almost what I kind of felt like the Frost era was really defined by, was just, we could not manage the talent we had. It was almost like, you would get these guys in and they just wouldn't be able to produce. And I don't know what it was. I just think it was that killer instinct at practice. I just don't know if he was really pushing them the way they needed to be pushed. I just don't know if it was what it really was, man. It just seems like it was all these little things that just weren't being done that kind of compounded and compounded and compounded, and just we weren't able to do it. But yeah, let's see here. Gavin Robinson says we have to clean up penalties. When I was watching the game, I was getting upset, but I told myself, Gavin, it's just the game. I know you want to win a lot of games. Right. Yeah, the penalties was another thing, we kind of talked about in this as well, was, it seemed like at times early in this game, because it was really hard to really grade this game or to really gauge this game. It was over so fast, I felt like. But, in critical points of this game, whenever our offense was getting the ball going or driving down the field, they would have a penalty on like second down, push them back, then they'd have a big sack, and then it would just, it just threw the whole thing off. And I think Casey Thompson, he really got shook up, and he kind of got rattled with it, right? As we kind of go back, he was 14 of 20, 129 yards and a touchdown. Again, our O-line, we gave up 4 sacks. I mean, it was just rough today, man, to say the least. Let's see here. Let's see here. He says, Jim Philippi says again, the D linemen need to be able to control the running lanes, execute an effective pass rush, and occupy the O line so the linebackers can make plays. Exactly. I've said this, and I'm going to say this again until I'm blue in the face. The defense that we're running is allowing the other team's offensive linemen to get up to that level. They're not playing sound gap football. They're not filling their gaps the right way, right? And I think part of that is because we're running two defensive tackles, and then we've got two guys who are edge rushers who are trying to play out there. And the other teams are just scooping up. They're just blocking them, putting a hat on a hat, and then zone blocking up. And that's how they're able to sort of get back there. A way to stop that would be to go get three defensive tackles, which would be, again, Ty Robinson, Colton Feist, and Stephon Wynn, or Devon Drew. Put them out there. Put both your edge rushers out there. So now you've got five guys on that line, and then make it a lot harder for those interior linemen to get up to our linebackers. That's, to me, that would be that's what when I talk about scheme, that's what I mean. Now, the downside of doing that is you're going to have to throw one of those nickel, one of those nickel or one of those dime players, defensive backs. You're going to have to probably throw them out of the game. But again, and we saw it early in the game, when we actually wanted to blitz and we wanted to do that, we got after Dylan Gabriel. We were able to get to him, and we threw him off, right? Up until that big run he had. It just, like I said, it's just one of those things where they kind of called the dogs off, I felt like, and they weren't able to, they stopped trying to get after him. They dropped back and started playing more of that zone at certain times. And that's when you just started seeing them pick us apart, and you see it. Yeah. Let's see here. Gavin Robinson, he says, let's see, watching the film and watching the game on YouTube, how we should fix the thing we need to fix. I'm a little confused there. I think what you're trying to say is watching the film on it. Man, a lot of it is just schematically, kind of like I was talking about. I think that they need to switch up their schemes. I think on defense, they need to do that for sure. And they need to play more of a man concept, and they just need to pin their ears back and get after it. They need to figure out a way to get all three of their defensive tackles on the field at one time. They also need to figure out a way to get Caleb Tanner, Garrett Nelson, and O'Shawn Mathis on the field, and rotating those guys and doing certain things like that. I saw that today early on, and they didn't look terrible when they did that. That's what I would do on defense. On offense, I would run the ball. Hell, I would almost worry about trying to run the ball 100 times a game, honestly. I don't know if our offensive line is going to be able to hold up as we get into the Big Ten. I think honestly, I don't know if they're going to be able to hold up, as we get into the Big Ten play. I think it's going to be a pretty rough go for us. Yeah, that's my thoughts on it. Dom Hargis says Joseph had a tough week. He has the job to get the kids mentally in front of. He has the job, to get the kids mentally and fundamentally ready. Yeah, I think so. I think he'll look a lot better. I think they'll regroup. I think you'll see a better product on the field next week, or not next week, but in a couple of weeks when we go to play Indiana. Gosh, let me see over here real quick if you guys will hold in with me. I think Indiana. My computer's not really reloading over here. I think Indiana beat Western Kentucky. Let me see if y'all hold on here. Yeah, they beat them. But they went to overtime with Western Kentucky. So, yeah, I don't know. I think, again, it'll be pretty interesting to kind of see, how we kind of get in there and what they kind of are changing. He's going to have more time. Mickey Joseph is going to have a lot more time to do that. NCAA playoff says, we finally got to see Chubba Purdy. We didn't do horribly, but I can see why he's not playing much. Yeah, again, he had a couple. He did a couple things good, but again, it was in garbage time. You know what I mean? I think Casey Thompson's probably our best bet. If we're going to go with a more athletic look to it, you want to run a lot more of the option game, which we've kind of talked about. You trot some others out there, but I don't know. I mean, they seem kind of the personnel of it, with the quarterback position, they seem very, uh, man, they just seem very stuck. They don't know who they want to throw out there, right? So that's the big thing. Um, Hargis Chuba is a red shirt. Okay, yeah, that could be good too. If Chuba's a red shirt, then that makes sense for sure. Um, so yeah, I think for right now, that's actually going to do it for us, guys. I mean, we're approaching that the hour and 10-minute mark. Again, it's not the unfortunately not the game we really wanted, for sure. But again, man, it's tough when that happens. Again, I think again, I appreciate you guys as always, man. I mean, you guys have, again, you guys are prove why we're one of the best fan bases in the game. It's it's not always easy, but we're gonna regroup and we'll be back in a couple of weeks and we're gonna be still doing this against Indiana. So guys, that's gonna conclude it. Again, as always, I'm your host, Christian Hunt. Here for the Voice of College Football Nebraska editions. As always, GBR, and we will see you guys here in a couple of weeks when we look to hopefully beat Indiana.